Hello and welcome to our kitchen table. I'm sitting here with a cat who won't leave us alone and my wife, your therapist. And today we're doing a part 2 of last week's episode where
Yep.
I'm just asking you questions we found online from the subreddit Ask a Therapist.
Yeah.
Again, shouts out to, the internet
Thanks,
for
internet.
good content ideas. Really enjoyed our last discussion on this. So I've got a lot of good questions here I'd love to get your take on.
I think a lot of the things therapists want to talk about are not the things that people actually need to know more about. So I love a real life question. I'm really excited that we get to do this.
Yeah, these are actually like human beings asking human questions about what it's like to be a therapist, what I should be looking for, those sorts of things. So I think it's immensely helpful. Before we dive in, like I've done, I think the last 2 episodes, I'm going to remind you respectfully that we're not reading ads. We're not trying to waste your time with absolute cringe lord levels of bullshit. And in exchange, I'm just going to ask that you share the podcast with people you think are struggling mentally. Insult them as you do it. Say, hey, I know that life sucks for you right now. You're a terrible person, and we thought that you would enjoy this podcast. So if you could do that.
And if you already do that, thank you so much.
Yeah, if you're already out here like championing us to your friends and family, we appreciate you. We are growing slowly but surely. It's fascinating. It's such an honor.
It's wild, yeah.
Yeah, it really is. So if y'all could keep that up for us, I would appreciate it. Because God knows, I mean, we printed out business cards for the podcast, and we've handed out one because we're just so embarrassed to be like, we have a podcast.
I've handed out one as well, so now
we've handed out 2.
Doubled our numbers.
Well, we printed out 50, and we have 48 remaining because it's just, there's nothing that I could imagine being more cringy than somebody coming up to you and being like, check out my podcast. Here's my business card.
Well, it's the same thing. Like when you and I were dating, saying this is my boyfriend indicates 100 different things. Like you could be the person I met last weekend and we started dating, or we could be in a long-term committed relationship.
And we've lived together for a decade.
Right,
yeah.
And boyfriend is the same word. And I hated calling you my boyfriend because I was like, this isn't really what I mean when I say it. I feel like the same thing having a podcast. Like it could mean, hey, started this in my basement last night, feeling really good about it, here you go. Or like we've been doing this for a minute and actually have something worth sharing. So
well, either way,
knows.
it's hard to promote yourself. It just is.
Yeah,
or in
guys,
my opinion, it
help
is.
us.
Guys, help. We're very bad at this.
No, but really, thank you so much if you do that, and we appreciate your support. It has been growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's jump in. You ready?
Are you going to intro us? As we just got finished saying, we are podcast professionals, so now we're going to do the intro.
All right. Well, fuck. My name is Price, and I married your therapist, and she's hurting my feelings just a little bit, but, we'll work through it.
My name is Ash, and I'm your therapist. Please keep in mind that even though this is a podcast about therapy and mental health, it's not the same thing as or a replacement for therapy.
We talked about you mixing up the intro that you do.
Yeah, I sometimes say therapy about therapy and mental health instead of mental health and therapy.
No.
It's the same
okay.
thing.
Who could even possibly remember that difference?
Me? Me? Am
No,
I
the distinction, like change it up to...
Oh, changing it to something.
Yeah.
What were we going to change it to?
You were going to say like, and thanks for coming to my podcast.
That's not what I was going to
No,
say.
but it
I
was
think
gonna be
we
something
wrote it down
different.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's the thing. The therapy field requires a lot of like being way overly specific about stuff, and I get the like safety measures and having broad safety measures is important, but also like you guys know this isn't therapy. Like this is a therapist talking with her husband. It's not the same thing as therapy, and we're trying to figure out how can I live into how seriously I take my like ethical requirements as a therapist, and also not treat our audience like children. I don't want to do that. And I hate how many parts of therapy are like, your clients are stupid and don't know what they're talking about. Like, no, I'm not on board with that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But we were talking about changing it. Maybe next time. Tune in next time and hear me probably say the same fucking thing I've been saying the whole time.
I could just imagine somebody, oh, they've got a new episode up. I can't wait to hear. Listen to the first, 10 minutes as we ramble on, hear what we changed it to, and then you can dip. That's fine. So, quick recap. Last week, here are a few of the questions that we asked. We're not going to go into the answers, but if you didn't listen to last week's episode, this is what you missed out on. Have you ever wished you could be friends with a client instead of being their therapist? Can a mentally ill person be a psychologist or adjacent career paths? I got a new therapist. I've been in therapy longer than he's been practicing, and after 2 sessions, he's already throwing diagnoses around. Should I be skeptical? Mm-hmm. And what percentage of complex trauma cases do you say, okay, you're good now? In my view, you have fully recovered from your trauma.
Yeah.
And therapists, how honest are you with your clients?
Yeah.
It was a good discussion. Those are good questions.
They were great questions.
Okay, let's start with an easy one.
Okay.
Maybe not easy. Do gaslighters, aka abusers, ever change because of therapy?
Oh.
I'm thinking narcissist. Yeah. I'm thinking like people who are just throughout your entire life have been abusive to you, Yeah. Is it possible for them to find real change as a result of therapy?
So those don't tend to be the folks I work with. So this is all now going to be like a little bit outside of what I'm doing. I'm trying to think, have I?
Would you know? Would you know if your therapist was like, I'm sorry, if your client was a narcissist? Because if you're hearing it from their perspective, like a narcissist isn't a narcissist to themselves. They're not sitting in sessions being like, I think I'm a narcissist. Like,
no, I have so many clients who come in saying, I think I'm a narcissist, and it's because they've lived with a narcissist.
Who accuse them of being a narcissist?
Yeah. So that's
the funny thing about people who are narcissistic and abusive is they always accuse you of the things that are true of them.
Of exactly what they're fucking doing.
Yeah.
Like, you're cheating on me, you're manipulating me, you're every term they can use that describes them.
I don't love the phrase. It's like if you've got one finger pointing at somebody, you've got 3 pointing back at you, and 1 pointing towards the sky because your thumb is just doing its own thing. I don't love that phrase, but that's what comes to mind. When a narcissist is like, you are A, B, and C, they are projecting.
The narcissist in my life literally loved that phrase and would say it all of the time if anything was ever thrown at them.
Because they're talking about themselves every time. I was watching an old video of the H3H3 podcast, Frenemies. I'm sorry, I'm only bringing this up because, Ash, you told me that you've had a number of clients who have told you they listen to the podcast. You have a number. You don't advertise to the client or the podcast to all of your clients?
Oh, yeah. It's accessible. I'm not hiding it, but you don't have to listen to the podcast if you're a client. That's not required.
But you've had a number of clients who have signed up with you, had no idea about the podcast, and then later told you that they've been listening to it. And a number of them have been so impressed that we knew about the toxic gossip train.
Like a cultural reference?
Yeah, a cultural reference, I think that they think we live in like some sort of basement or something.
Well, like how I used to think my teachers must live under their desks and like just be at school all the time. Like that's your purpose online.
I mean, in between sessions, you and I do like get into the closet and hook our feet into the racks and sleep upside down like the vampires that we are, and we just wake up to record this podcast. Right. But yeah, the H3H3 podcast, Ethan Klein did a show with a woman named Trisha Paytas, and this is kind of old. This is like 2 or 3 years old now, but I was watching it the other day where she is like, and it was called Frenemies, and they had like a huge breakup, like explosion on the podcast, and it was like she kept accusing him of things over and over on like a live stream. It was very inappropriate, but everything that she was saying was obviously true of herself. Like it was like uncanny. Like every accusation was not true of him or did not appear to be true. I don't know these fucking people. I don't really fucking care. I'm just observing, but it appeared to be true of him. Yeah. And we're not true of him. Yeah. They were true of her.
Yeah.
It was.
But she was the one throwing the accusations.
Yeah, so this was yesterday that I was like, I just put something on in the background of Baldur's Gate 3 because I be playing a video game called Baldur's Gate 3 right now. I'm a dwarf paladin. I'm level 8. I am unstoppable. I holy smite everybody. And I'm trying to have sex with everybody in my party. This, I'm sorry, I'm getting really off trail here.
You're good.
Do gaslighters ever change in therapy, Ash? Can Trisha Paytas get help? That's what we're wondering.
I really do think that people who elect to come to therapy, who want to come to therapy themselves, are capable of change in therapy. I don't think there's anybody who's just like, well, this is just you forever and ever. What's more common is that people who are really manipulative don't go to therapy. Or if they do get dragged to therapy, maybe with their partner for couples therapy, or maybe they're forced to go, they're in it for a very limited amount of time, and what they're saying to the therapist isn't true, and then they leave therapy like, haha.
I won.
I won. I went, and the therapist said I was fine. And the funny thing about therapists is that we're not mind readers. Like, we are believing the things that you're saying. And if you just come in and you're like, hey, everything's fine. I mean, even if we do guess that something else is going on, it's like, there's nothing to be done if you don't want to change.
It's like bringing a knife to a pickup basketball game and, like, puncturing the ball and being like, ha, I win, and, like, running out. Like, you're playing a different game than the rest of us, my guy.
We didn't play the game.
Yeah,
like,
right.
And nobody could make you do it. Like, nobody could make you actually play basketball with us. Like, you were going to do that the whole time.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think that people are capable of change, but I don't think that narcissists tend to go to therapy on their own. I am aware that question reminds me of a program in our area that's for abusive men. I'm pretty sure the entry to the program has something to do with like having had a protective order pulled against you, like a no contact order. I think part of your like court, whatever can be your court order, is that you have to go to this place. And the woman who runs it has such a unique perspective on abusers and manipulators and that sort of thing. I think their program is actually doing incredible things. And they have seen people reunited with their families in a really fantastic way and like actually seen real growth and change occur. I don't think it happens to everybody because it is a court order. And a lot of people are going to go and do the lip service and not change.
Yeah, and be resentful.
My understanding is that the program's actually incredible, and the reports from the families of these people are, this is a different person, and this is incredible for us. So, yeah, I think everybody can change, but I'm much more likely to get somebody in therapy who says, I'm worried I'm a narcissist, and it turns out they've just been influenced like under the care of or in a relationship with a narcissist and been called those things so many times themselves they suspected of themselves.
Can I just trauma dump on you and everybody listening for a second?
We love that.
Yesterday I was at the gym.
Oh yeah, jeez.
And I'm overhearing a conversation between these two men, and one of them's moaning about the fact that his his stepdaughter just confided to his wife that he sexually assaulted her when she was a child. And he's like, she don't remember none of the, like, I've been paying her bills since she was a kid, and, you know, maybe, sure, I, like, picked her up and kissed her on her neck or something, but, like, this is bullshit, man. And everybody in the gym is, like, commiserating with him. Like, yeah, women be like that, man. They be doing that shit to you. It's unbelievable. Like, he's the fucking victim.
Yeah,
and
they're
I know,
all doing that stuff to the women in their lives.
Yeah, and I know enough about it now that, like, it's very unlikely for a woman to make that sort of claim unless it's true.
Well, it ruins your life. I mean, it's so hard to make a claim like that. You don't... The story is that, like, they do it for the attention, they do it to ruin somebody's life. But what happens more often than not is that dude continues, or whoever it is, the person ends up continuing living their life just fine, and you get rejected by your family. Like, that's what normally happens. Nobody does it for fun. It sucks. It sucks to do. You don't want to talk about that part of your life. You don't want to have to tell somebody else about it. And you've been so gaslit and groomed and everything up until that area. Like, people don't talk about it. It's it's absurdly rare for somebody to make up a claim like that. Has it ever happened? Yes, but most of the time those claims are retracted because of the horrible abuse they suffer afterwards, not because something was untrue.
So I'm sitting there like, this isn't my business. I don't know this story. I don't know this guy. So I kept my shit to myself. I'm not trying to intrude on like other people's stuff because I just don't know. But it was just making. I'm thinking of him when I'm like, do gaslighters ever change in therapy? It's like very likely, anecdotally, but it's very likely that this dude did do what he was accused of, and is not going to ever like acknowledge that in any capacity. And I don't think any amount of like therapy is going to change that unless the changes internally.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And that's, once again, that dude is not somebody who's going to elect to go to therapy all on his own. He wants to believe the story that he believes. He doesn't want to go talk about something different.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it happens, but not often, not in that situation. And the other thing, I think the behind the scenes of this question is that a lot of people ask because they continue to feel so deeply hopeful that the person in their life could change.
Oh, that's so
and
hard.
they feel not only hopeful but responsible for helping that person change. I think about this all the time with somebody who's abusive in my life, that I'll get caught up in this cycle of, what could I say different? Like, what are the magic words that I could say to this person where they will realize what they've done, where they'll feel apologetic for it, where we'll have some sort of reunification. I can forgive them and we can move on. I want that so deeply, but the reality is that's a symptom of the abuse that I've suffered. It's not it's not real. It's not true.
Well, part of it's
And
like
it's
very
not,
much like you can affect change here, like because
because
my behavior is your responsibility.
because the abuse says my behavior is your fault. It's your fault that these things happen to you. It's your job to change. That's the only thing that could relieve this situation. So then you grow up with the idea that, like, I could fix it. The reason it's not fixed is because I haven't done enough.
This dude at the gym excused his behavior by saying, "I'm just trying to show her how a man should treat her."
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
Because it was like, I'm doing this for you. This is your fault. And if you have a problem with it now, that's your fault. Because my motivation was good.
Right.
And that's what he was willing to admit to in the gym.
Right. Just out in the open to people he doesn't know that. I mean, in front of people he doesn't know that.
So that to me means, who knows what really happened.
Right. What's in the interior of, like, your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, I think that people can change. I think that what I hope that this person could know is that it's not their job to change them, and that they're able to step back from this and not wait for change, but to go live a happy life without this person.
The abuser is depending on you, thinking it's your job to change them, and that's a miserable existence that leads nowhere.
It's 100% leaning into never taking any responsibility for your own actions. It's that, like, this guy's saying, I didn't do anything, but if I did, it wasn't a big deal. And if it was a big deal, it wasn't my fault. And if it was my fault, like, everything is, well, maybe that could have happened, but it wasn't that bad. Maybe it could have happened, but that wasn't my intention. Maybe it could have happened, but, like, she's wrong for accusing me of this. That's it. That's the mindset.
And he outright admitted to, like, maybe I kissed her on the neck. Why are you kissing your stepdaughter on the neck, my guy?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I'm not the physical, what's the word I'm looking for? Physical contact, sort of like love language police. I think like a stepdaughter can give her stepfather a hug, and that could be a nice thing, right?
Yeah.
But like, why are you doing? You've just been accused of this, and you're saying you did that, and that sounds kind of fucking weird to me, man. I don't know.
Yeah, the math isn't mathing.
Yeah, in that context, I'm like, ugh, I really wish that I hadn't lost my headphones so that I don't have to listen to this shit.
Yeah.
Makes me not want to go to that gym again. That's for sure. Especially when, like, minutes later, the gentleman that he was speaking to called another guy the F slur, and thought it was hilarious. And I was like, catch me in, like, 2013. I would have thought that shit was hilarious, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whew, yikes. Yeah.
All right. Next question. This is more just how do you run your business type of question.
Oh, interesting.
How do you handle no-shows?
Oh, yeah. How do I handle no-shows? That's a good question. So I have a written policy that I also talk about in a first or early session with a client. where if you no show, I've had to set that hour aside. I'm there and I'm gonna wait 10 to 15 minutes, probably try to contact you during that time. Um, and then after that, unfortunately, I have to charge you for that time because I still spent the time
Yeah.
there. I showed up for our session. Um, and so, but if it's your very first session, I just this week had a no show on an intake session. I'm not charging because I haven't gotten the chance to have that conversation with them. And if I think somebody has a no show for a reason that they couldn't help, which I've had before, I waive the fee. Like, I try to be as flexible with people as possible, and I talk about that and when I'm having that initial conversation. But no show or a very late, less than 24 hours before your session cancellation, that there isn't some outside circumstance that you can't help,
Right.
I have to charge for that time because yeah.
I think what people may not realize is that it's less about because you get the hour back.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to go move, like do something
Well,
else.
I get part of that hour back. I get
Yeah.
like 40. I wait 15 minutes and then I have to document everything. And then I probably still have to reach out or send you some sort of email. So I get about half an hour of our hour-long session back.
The problem is that that's not a half an hour that you can go get paid
Yeah,
to do
there's
your
nothing else I
job.
can do.
Yeah, that you're screwed, right? You're
Right.
screwed out of that paid hour, and you were trying to. It would be a different story if our mortgage company was like, "Oh, you had some no-shows. We'll lower your bill
Right,
this month."
right.
Like it'd be a
I'd like to
different
pay less.
story.
Yeah.
But we've got bills to pay.
Mm-hmm.
You have a right to earn a living.
Yep.
You had to receive like a tremendous amount of education
Yep.
and go through a lot to get to where you are, and you deserve to be like compensated fairly
Yeah.
for the work that you do. And you're out of an hour of being able to see a paying client if you
Yeah.
have a client that no shows, which is why you charge for a no show,
Yep.
especially when it becomes a pattern or somebody's done it to you a couple of times.
And I mean, my clients are so respectful of my time. Like, I just can't get over how I feel like I am so respectful of their time and they give that right back to me.
Yeah.
And I mean, clients always try to tell me as soon as possible if they're not going to be able to make a session or they want to reschedule.
And sometimes
I
shit
try to,
happens. Like
right?
I've no showed to
Yep.
therapy appointments before,
Yep.
for sure.
And your therapist has been flexible with you too. I don't think you got charged the first time you no
Not the
showed.
first time, but every time since then.
Yeah. So yeah, I try to handle that as respectfully as possible. I make sure we've had a conversation about it. If I suspect that maybe, oh, maybe we didn't, maybe I wasn't as clear as I needed to be with that, or I know that client has a financial hardship, or I know that, whatever, I really try to communicate as directly as possible. I don't want to surprise somebody with a fee. That's not fair.
And you don't you're here to provide therapy. You're not here to bill somebody to not show up, right?
Yeah.
You're
That's
not
a no show sucks for everybody. I don't want to bill for that time. I don't want you to get charged for it. I would rather us get to meet. Like, yeah, I mean, it sucks for everybody when that happens. And I try to accommodate as much as I can without putting myself in a position where I can't afford to run my business anymore.
Yeah. No, if you wanted to be able to like bill to do nothing all day, you would have like studied business management and tried to go into like being an executive at a corporation.
And I try to give all
That was
right.
stupid. I'm sorry.
But I try to give as much value for the pay as I can. So not only am I, showing up fully engaged for the sessions, doing everything I can to be on
Right.
time and giving the full amount of time and all of that, I I also will respond to messages from a client during the week if I get the opportunity. I'll also, if we make a plan and they're like, man, I'd really love written instructions for how to do that, or I'm looking for a job and I'd love help finding, how do I start that process? I'll then take time and write an email and lay out the steps and send that to them. Like, I want to give a lot of value for the time, but at the end of the day, I can't afford to run a business if I don't get paid for those hours that I do. There's a lot of outside work as a therapist that you don't get charged for or that you don't get paid for, which is why therapy is expensive. It shouldn't just be that you're paying for an hour. You should be paying for more ongoing support. And I get to do that. I do get to
Yeah.
provide more for that time.
Yeah. So my advice to your clients is, give you a heads up as quickly as you can.
Yeah, and that's what I get to say directly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say to your clients is that because I am now becoming aware that you have a number of clients who listen to the podcast, which I think is hilarious.
It's so sweet. I'm honored that people would take the hour with me and still listen to a podcast.
What people may not know is that your desk for work is set up in a little corner in our bedroom.
Yeah.
So if you're one of Ash's clients, from now on, I want you to know that when you hop on Simple Practice with her, I'm not in the room. I'm never in the room. There's a sound machine outside the door. You have complete and total privacy. What I want you to know, though, is I fart in that room every day. Every single day. Not during the sessions, not before or immediately after. I'm just saying that that's my bedroom, too, and I fart in there.
What is the purpose of sharing that information?
Hey, you know what? I just want to inject my personality into this because people are listening, And if I can say that and people keep listening, that will prove to me that I'm unstoppable.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Was it funnier in my head? I think it was.
Well,
Okay. Well, let us know if you don't fart in your bedroom. If you're like above that, hit me up. That's amazing. Good for you. I have regular body functions.
That's great.
Okay.
We're happy for you, Bryce.
Next question. My therapist says, ooh, this is fantastic. I love this one. My therapist says I can't, it says my T, capital T says, and my thing went to testosterone. My testosterone says, my therapist says I can't say anything that would make her reject me. Is that even true? No. Okay, so yesterday in therapy, I disclosed something truly shameful about my past, and when she did not judge me, I broke down crying and said that I had worried she would tell me to get lost and never come back. Aww. She replied, "Oh no, sweetheart, I would never do that, and I will never reject you. There is nothing you could tell me in this room about what you have done that would ever make me reject you. However heavy it may be, I can handle the heaviness, and I want to handle it." Yeah. I often think that therapists usually say this because they truly don't think you've done anything remotely bad. Aww. And they often assume that what you're keeping a secret is something shameful that happened to you. But what if the shameful thing is something you have actually done? Could she handle it? Could you guys handle it? Aww. It's a good question.
It is such a good question, and I love getting that insight I just feel a lot for that person. I love getting that insight. I know that people feel that way.
They ask a flip of the question too. What's something you could not handle as a therapist? What is an example of something that's like, all right, that's a little much for me as a client or as a therapist? The client's maybe crossed a line here, and I'm not able to cope with this. Yeah. Which is also a fair question. Yeah. Because I think it's easy for a therapist to say, there's nothing you could tell me that would make. There absolutely is. There are things that a client could confess to you that would be too much.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you think?
The things that are too dark and twisted to even say out loud. I could confess that I'm regularly engaging in those sorts of activities. And would you be okay with that?
Yeah, I think I disagree with you. So here's my thought process for this. First of all, this person is not alone. I think everybody who comes to therapy feels this way.
I felt that way about farting in the room.
Maybe my therapist could handle something shameful, but they think that what I would be talking about is something shameful that happened to me, but really I am a shameful person because shame is I'm a bad person who does bad things. That's what shame is. And feel like they've done something so bad that they couldn't say. I've never ever had a client share something that changed the way that I felt about them. And in fact, the fact that you're coming to therapy and wanting to share this part of you, I mean, maybe not wanting to, but that you do say that, is just incredible to me. And I have so much respect for you coming into this space and saying that. I think I would have an issue if somebody was wanting to proudly talk about active abuse that they were perpetuating against somebody. But the fact that this person has shame around the bad quote unquote things that they've done tells me that that's not what they're sharing. Even if maybe they have perpetuated abuse or they are an abuser or whatever.
Right.
That's not the same energy, right, coming into that conversation as proudly being like, yeah, I beat up a kid, you know? I would have an issue with somebody proudly sharing something, not because I think that you need to feel ashamed to share something. That's not a prerequisite. But because this is a harder cycle now to stop if you're proud and excited about it.
Right.
That's going to be tricky. I don't feel that way about anything. The only exception that I have to this is that, and I share this with clients when they start, my ethical boundaries are that I will keep things confidential. If you or somebody else are in immediate danger, we have to figure out that situation together, and it might be a situation that lends to needing to make a report. Now, I don't think that people being hospitalized for suicidal ideation is usually the most beneficial thing. I think it's got to be a very specific case for that to make sense, because suicidal ideation covers a very broad spectrum.
Right.
I don't think I think there are a lot of things that people worry, like, oh, that's going to be the line, and that's not really the line. But if you or somebody else is in immediate danger, we want to work through that together. Or if you, and especially if that's an elderly person or a kid, those are different rules as well, the degree to which those folks have to be protected. And so we are going to have to figure out a plan now together to keep everybody safe. But you came to therapy and talked about that. I have talked to people, specifically as a sexual assault victim advocate. I'm not even sure I want to share this because I don't want to shame this person, but somebody was in a very difficult situation where, because they were in a relationship with an abusive person, they had been witnessing ongoing abuse of their child for a long time. And they had been not telling anybody, and that abuse was still ongoing. Like, it was going to happen again. And I didn't feel like hatred toward that person, or what a scary situation, what a horrible thing.
Right.
And it had to be my immediate goal to make sure that could never happen to that kid again, because that kid did not deserve to be abused that way. So you could say that this person was doing something bad. I think they were also admitting that they were participating in some of the abuse. So it's my immediate goal. We've got to protect kiddo.
But you're also recognizing that they're here and they're talking about it, so it's not something that they're like...
But thank God this person called. Thank God they decided to say something about what was going on. I had nothing but respect for that. It was a horrible thing that was happening, and that was continue to happen, and that I remember that there was a degree to which they were participating. But oh my God, for that person to get the clarity in that moment to call and to make sure we're on the same team. You and I both want better for your kid. Right now, I don't think you're in the best place to be able to provide that protection for your kid. But man, we're going to figure it out.
Right.
We're going to make sure kiddo's taken care of. But I don't ever think back on that person as like somebody that I feel difficult about, if that makes sense. So no, I don't think that there's something so dark and so deep that...
Well, as a therapist, you're not the punitive side of this, right?
Yeah.
You're not putting anybody in jail, so you can delight in the fact that they are seeking help and the stuff's coming to the light, so it can be dealt with, right?
Yeah.
It can be addressed.
Oh
Otherwise, it's just the abuse would have continued to happen.
Yep.
And there's nothing that anybody could have done about it because nobody knew.
Yeah, that was going to keep happening, and it was just going to happen, and nobody was going to be able to intervene. So thank goodness this person reached out and wanted to say something that was clearly hard for them to share.
No, you don't punish somebody for seeking help. Maybe there's punitive action needed if they've been but that's a separate thing, right? Like right now, I'm here trying to get help.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to ask for help.
Yeah. So no, I don't think that there's something. There are certain things that ethically I do have an obligation to respond to in a certain way.
Right.
Have to make sure that kid's safe. Have to make sure your elderly grandparent isn't being abused in their, whatever. Like whatever that is, I got to do something. But no. No. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the things that live in us feel so shameful, in that I think I have clients who feel that way, that this person feels quite often, and I'm not usually alarmed by the things that I'm hearing. And in fact, I just immediately feel really compassionate, like I do hearing from this person. I was telling you the other day, I'm in a very weird position in life as a human where I'm frequently on the receiving end of having somebody say, I can't believe I'm about to say this out loud, but da 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 da, this thing happened or I did this thing. And what a big,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, what a huge honor to be on the receiving end of that so frequently.
Yeah, I've heard that like from somebody who's not you
In
like
your
twice in my life, right?
Right, right. It's very rare, I think, as humans for us to be the receiver of that sort of thing.
Right.
And I am a receiver of that on a weekly basis. But obviously, I won't share, but I can't even bring to mind what most of those things are because they live in that person in such a shameful way. But in reality, it's now my job to get to be like, of course you responded that way. Of course that. Let me now explain to you why this makes sense.
I think what's important here is that you're not saying I just hear super fucked up shit all the time, and
Yeah,
so it
I
doesn't phase
don't.
me anymore.
Oh no.
You just hear this stuff, and it's just normal,
Yeah.
right? Like this stuff we think is so beyond the pale,
Yeah.
and we're so ashamed of. It's just like normal human responses to difficulties in our life,
Yeah.
right?
And if if you're somebody who harbors a lot of anger, who has harmed other people, who has done things, I've spoken with those people. Let me tell you exactly why that makes sense and why anybody who had lived through the things that you lived through would have the same sort of response you have. And now that you have gotten to say this out loud, let's take a big deep breath and let's figure out how you can be more of who you are and who you want to be.
No, I mean the ways just even in our marriage that I have been like utterly hateful towards you. Um, I've held with a lot of shame, and it took understanding why those things happened
Yeah.
without giving myself a free pass. Like
Yeah.
understanding why it happened is different than excusing it.
Right. Let's
Right.
take personal responsibility for what happened. It's not the same thing we're saying to just dismiss this.
But it took me needing to understand it to be able to start like working through it in a meaningful way and like have meaningful dialogue with you
Yeah.
about how sorry I am for that behavior and actually affecting real change.
Yeah.
You know. And it takes that like you've got to have some compassion for yourself
Yep.
to be able to move forward from it because
Yeah.
the shame, being ashamed of it, just keeps you there.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I know you're saying that there are things you would draw a line on, and you're a human being and you're allowed to draw a line there. I don't think that I have.
I was just thinking if somebody came through and was like, I am eagerly and excitedly and repeatedly sexually assaulting children who live in my home, like, all right. I'm not going to be a great therapist for you, you know?
Well, right. I don't think that people present that way in therapy because that person doesn't want to go to therapy. They don't want to change. If they're
You're saying by the
eagerly and
very
excited about doing
by the very merit of going to therapy in the first place, we've moved past that what
Yeah.
I'm describing, which makes sense to me.
Yeah. I can think of scenarios, not in heavy duty ways, but in ways where clients have been like, they casually mention something that they do, and I'm recognizing that that's probably a painful thing to be on the receiving end of. But they know that something's not working in their relationships. They might not know that that's harmful,
Yeah.
but they're coming because something's not working and they want to talk through that. So we get the opportunity to talk through it, and that's not something they continue to do. I just don't worry about that. I'm never sitting there like, "Oh my gosh, I hope this person doesn't say some fucked up shit that I have to deal with." Like I never
Yeah.
and I don't hear stuff that I feel that way about. And I hear things that I know that people feel that way about themselves.
Yeah.
But let me help you understand why that makes sense. And we can take personal responsibility, but also show yourself some compassion, and we can move forward in a way. I have told clients things like, you can do that, and the other person might decide to no longer be in relationship with you.
Right.
Somebody's response to that behavior might be that they choose to not be in relationship with you, and we need to accept that that's a possibility here. But that's true whether you're doing fucked up shit or not. You might just be existing as a person and the other person feels like you're too different. Like, there are 100 reasons that could happen. You don't have to feel ashamed of those things. But yeah, no, please come. Therapy gets so much better when you share the things that you feel ashamed about, because that's the heart of it. Like, otherwise we're talking about all of the connecting features,
Right.
but we're not talking about the root. And I get it. Of course you don't want to talk about it, but if your therapist is making you feel ashamed, stop seeing them. Genuinely, that is a hard line. If your therapist is telling you you should feel ashamed, don't. Don't. But I love that this person shared and their therapist was like, no, I couldn't change the way that I feel about you. I think that's lovely.
Next question. Therapist shared a lot about themselves during our initial session.
Ooh.
Do I change? They shared about where they live, their age, their hobbies, their own struggles, and their medication.
Interesting.
I get a little sharing can help, but this felt a bit much.
Mm-hmm.
This person's going to therapy through their work, so it's a very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And they feel like their therapist was too chummy, too forthcoming.
Yeah.
I guess my question for you is, like, what's the balance there?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this a little bit before, but really, should this person be concerned if your therapist is like that forthcoming? I'll tell you what, ain't nobody hearing about my meds the first time we chat, and your boy on some medication. But like, I'm comfortable sharing that on this podcast because you guys were like one happy family, except I don't know you.
Well, okay, here I am, and people now know probably most of the things on that list about me if they've listened to this podcast.
Yeah.
And those people could be my current clients or could be a future client. So that's
You've talked about that. That's strange. Normally, a client's coming in and doesn't know anything about you except what you decide to explicitly share. But if you have clients listening to this podcast, they know a lot more about you than they normally would.
more about me than I know about them right out of the gate.
Yeah, they know that I. Can I bring it back?
That you fart in the bedroom.
Nice.
They might have assumed that.
They probably wouldn't have crossed their minds, and then they heard it and they're like, "That's gross. This guy's dumb. Can we fast forward to the content?"
Yeah. Okay. I've lost. Oh yeah, that to me could go either way. I have had a therapist who, right out of the gate, a therapist I loved and continued to this day. I think that she's great. Shared a lot with me right out of the gate. She's like, here's some of my background. Here's information about me. She did share that she's on medication. She was ADHD and takes medication for her ADHD. I think she even shared she has taken like depression and anxiety medication. And she shared in a way that to me I thought was so appropriate and knocked some of the shame out of the room for me being my first time in therapy and that sort of thing. So I found it very appropriate. But that's up to you. You might get in the room and feel like this felt like they were sharing in a way that made me responsible for those things.
Right.
And that's inappropriate.
No, it's easy to say it is or is not appropriate at all times, but it's not that simple. It's highly contextual.
It's highly contextual. It could be contextual to you, not even just as any client, but as the person that you are and the things that you have dealt with. And maybe you want a therapist who's way more closed off and shares less.
Yeah. Like, I'm working in a new job now. I started at a new job a few weeks ago. I'm working in the office. It's like hybrid, 3 days a week. And so I've worked from home for years. So I'm getting to spend a lot more time with coworkers, and we're having much deeper, much more personable or impersonal conversations than I'm used to.
Yeah, than you have in years.
Than I have in years. But I am like very open about the fact that like I have bipolar disorder, and that's like not information that's legally allowed to be shared about me unless I'm the one who discloses it, right? Like, you are not allowed to talk about that at work if it's not you that you're talking about.
Right.
And it's like been very easy for me to share those things. But I'm very aware that like that could be pretty off-putting to people. So I'm like trying to be sure that the context in which I share that is an environment where the person even hearing that is very comfortable with hearing that, you know, because the context is super important.
Yeah.
Because that's a heavy thing to like admit or share about yourself.
Sure. And it comes with a lot of people have their own feelings about what that means and probably have negative connotations around a diagnosis like that. They've heard about it in a movie with somebody who's extreme, or they have a relative who really struggled and it's extreme.
And there's a lot of instances where people are like so excited to share that with you, or all of the DSM-5
criteria,
or all of the diagnoses that they've received, and it's like, this feels a little out of pocket, a little unhinged for you to be this forthcoming with this information. Are you okay? Like, I don't think that you're in the best state of mind.
Are you making me responsible for this information? And if this therapist feels like they are making you responsible for it, inappropriate, go switch. That's a great reason to do that.
Like, this person says the therapist was sharing about their own struggles. What are they trying to be like? I struggle too. I'm a human too. So I'm building empathy and rapport with you. Or like, I want to trauma dump on you.
Yeah.
You know, I want to use you as a crutch for how hard I feel my life is, you know? And you've had a therapist do that to you.
Yeah, where I felt like the sessions became about her sharing what was difficult for her. And that felt inappropriate. It was inappropriate for her.
It's like going to get a haircut and the hairdresser cuts their own hair and charges you for it.
Right. Let's not do that. Or they're like, hey, here are the scissors. Here's the stuff. I want you to help me out.
Yeah, if you could just get the back there, I can't see it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, what?
No, that's not appropriate. But I think it's contextual. So something else about therapists is that a lot of us are taught, most of us are taught in school, like, you never share anything. And so this has been a weird step for me to be sharing in a public way. I am finding it to be received in a way that people find helpful. That they're like, oh man, I want a therapist who's autistic. I want a therapist who doesn't just tell me, man, think different thoughts and you won't be anxious anymore. You know what it's like to deal with anxiety, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah.
That's great. I could imagine that there are some people who listen to this podcast and maybe feel like, oh my God, I never want Ash to be my therapist. And that's fine too. That's great. And I kind of like that I can get the information out there ahead of time so that people can make an informed decision about who they're having therapy with. Because I think my history, you can't show up as blank as we would like to think that a therapist can. I am impacted by the things that have happened in my life and the experiences that I've had. I again hope I'm doing work every single day to try not to bring that into the room in a way that makes somebody else responsible for it. That is so unfair, that is so inappropriate. But oh my God, I can't help that. Like, I am a human at the end of the day. And I think being forthright about that is important. The example I was going to say of like being taught not to share anything. Have I talked about age? I know we've talked about age, but have I talked about age on the podcast?
Maybe, but it's worth going over.
Okay, so for instance, I was taught not to share my age.
Yeah, if somebody's like, hey, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
Yep.
And you're supposed to say...
I wasn't taught this specifically like in school, but this is what I've been encouraged to do by other professionals, is to be like, well, if you can tell me how it will help you reach your treatment goals for me to share my age with you, then I might share my age with you. What sort of fucked up response is that? Like, you're allowed to be curious about that. I've had so many clients I've had a handful of clients ask me how old I am, and I'll just tell you. I don't need you to do the emotional labor of trying to convince me. If you need to know,
that's just another like fucked up thing. Gaslighting is not the correct term for that, but it feels like a mind game sort of thing where it's like, and this all goes back to the like, I'm the authority in the room.
It's power and control.
Yeah.
It's like, I know so many things about you and you're not allowed to know the first thing about me. I'll just share with clients how old I am if they're curious to know. Most people aren't curious to know how old I am, and that's fine too. But yeah, I'm not trying to...
What does that cost you, you know?
Yeah. I think potentially the end result could be that somebody goes, well, that's not an age of a person I feel comfortable working with. Either you're too old, you won't get it, or you're too young, you won't get it, regardless of the direction that goes. Well, then I'm glad you get to know that, and you can make a decision based off that if you need to. I wish we could take more time to get to know one another, but if my age is prohibitive for you, yeah, let's find a therapist in the age range you're looking for. Let's do it. Of
My
course.
age is prohibitive to me, dog. I turned 30 and everything's like a little grayscale, you know? Like, there used to be color out
now.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just getting so old.
Aw.
All right. Do you hug your clients? The answer to that is no. You run a virtual practice.
Yeah, not a lot of hugging.
But and then a lot of the in-person stuff you did was during COVID.
Yes.
So there was not.
Yep, I have been in a unique situation of not really being in a place to even be able to hug a client. Yeah. As a sexual assault victim advocate, I think I had 2 or 3 different people hug me. And that was, well, they wanted to hug me. They initiated. I think they all asked, can I hug you? And yes, yeah. And I gave them a hug. But then if I saw that person again, I wasn't going to expect a hug.
Yeah.
Because it had to do with the moment we were in. And if they wanted to hug me again, they could. I think it would also be appropriate if I personally had a boundary around not wanting to be touched. I think that's fine too. You might have a therapist who's not comfortable with that, and that's allowed. But I was fine to give somebody a hug if they wanted one. And then as a therapist, I've had just a couple of clients. Now I was working at a place past some of the big deal COVID restrictions. I had 1 or 2 people either on a last session or after a big session ask if they could give me a hug. I had a client deep in like grief, and we had really just had a great session, really processing through some grief, and they were like, I kind of feel like I'd like to give you a hug. Is that okay? Yes, absolutely. But again, it's not an exchange.
And you were never like, can I give you a hug?
I never initiated the hugging. I actually did once ask somebody, do you want me to, they seemed like they kind of were reaching out for something. I was like, would you feel more comfortable if I like held your hand or as we're talking about this or something? I forget what it was. Would you like a hug? And somebody was like, no, I'm not comfortable with that. I was like, that's great. And we moved on. It didn't change our interaction or our
Didn't
dynamic.
change the dynamic.
But I'm not asking for a hug for myself.
Yeah.
I have people in my life to hug me. Hugs are really important. I'm not getting hugs from clients. But yeah, I had a couple encounters and it was lovely. It was really nice. And then we didn't keep doing that after. Then they came back and now we're not in a deep grief moment and they weren't looking for a hug and that's fine.
I think that it's just a little element of humanity in it. These are human conversations. Yeah. We're getting deep into human emotion. Yeah. Sometimes a hug is appropriate. But if your therapist is like, where's my hug at? Like, that's a little fucking weird.
Don't do that. It should not be an expectation. It really shouldn't be the therapist initiating, asking for hugs. That's inappropriate. Maybe your therapist says, do you need a hug right now or something? But no.
No, I think that, like, with my therapist, I've been seeing her virtually for years. She just lives on the other side of town. It takes like an hour to get there. Yeah. We've met in person several times, but I haven't seen her in person in years. I think the next time I see her, I might greet her with a hug, perhaps.
Yeah, ask if you can give a hug.
Yeah, like, hey, it's so good to see you. Can I give you a hug? I could see that happening, but
there's something so beautiful about like spontaneous human interaction of you like seeing your therapist and being like, I really feel like I want to give you a hug right now. That is, I've had that happen the couple of times, and it is so beautiful and touching every time.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, I can totally understand in this moment you wanting a hug, and I would love to give you a hug.
Well, listen, to everybody listening, if you see Ashlyn in person and you give her a hug, just know that I'm extremely jealous. I'm an extremely jealous husband. So you better watch yourself, okay?
Also, know that in general, I'm not just out touching people in public. That's not my favorite thing.
Yeah, you're autistic.
Yeah, I'm like deeply autistic, guys. I don't just mind. But there are times where that's appropriate, and I love that. But yeah, your therapist should not be initiating. They shouldn't be, where's my hug at? That's not appropriate. But I've had it happen a couple of times spontaneously, and I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't now. It's all virtual.
All right, this person was located in Syria.
Okay.
And is asking, is there anything I can do to help myself if I can't get therapy?
I'm going to be honest, I don't really know what is accessible to them.
So they were
Do you think
specifically asking
online
for
support?
online resources. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what they have access to.
Yeah.
That's what they were asking for. They did not have access to like an in-person therapist.
Okay. Yeah.
And I also remember them saying that they don't have like the funds to pay for an online virtual therapist either. They're looking
Okay.
for free resources online.
Okay. There are, I wish I knew specifically what this person is struggling with. Maybe not off the top of my head would I know, but there are a lot of free online resources for support if you need mental
I
health
mean,
support.
they're located in Syria, so I'm guessing the heat's pretty bad.
Okay. I
Actually, I don't know shit about Syria. I was like, is it hot there? I don't. I suspect it is. I don't know.
So I know that there are, I'm trying to think about how being in a different country would impact this. I know there are like online helplines you can message on. You can go online and you can type with somebody
Yeah.
and get support on different like crisis lines. There are lots of online low cost therapy places. Again, I don't know access in a different country, but like Open Path Collective is a great low cost therapy option.
Are there any podcasts that you might recommend?
There's some podcasts you might check out. That is a huge resource. So many YouTube videos of therapists talking
Yeah.
or of, podcast recordings. um, I mean, there are great therapists providing resources on TikTok and
Yep.
on Instagram. And yeah, I think there are lots of things. You just, again, want to be selective.
And be discerning, because a lot of accounts get very popular providing kind of like pop culture psychology.
Mm-hmm.
That's like 10 ways to be happier, and like
Yeah.
if being happy meant following a list of 10 things, we would all be doing those things, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it goes deeper than that.
Yeah.
So like, but if there's a list of 10 ways to be happier, that's probably a solid list, right?
Yeah,
Like, I'm not trying to
fine.
discredit anybody with a list out there. I'm just saying that like sometimes these deep rooted emotional issues require more than a list to be.
Right. I
Yeah.
think that it's really hard to replace direct support that has to do with your specific circumstance. Somebody
Yeah.
who's knowledgeable about your culture and lifestyle and the things that you're going through, somebody who really can get in there and provide direct, unique support to you.
Yeah.
But man, there's a lot available on the internet, and I absolutely yes, I think that if you can't afford therapy, there's still so many ways to get some level of
Well,
support.
I think what a therapist provides more than the expertise and training that they have is the human relationship.
Well, I think about this person feeling ashamed a couple of questions ago, feeling ashamed about what they were sharing. Is
Yeah.
there a thing I could say that would make my therapist dislike me? That's a question we all have for ourselves. And it doesn't feel the same. I don't think people will be impacted the same way by me saying on this podcast, no, there's nothing you could do, as it feels like to have a human being look you in your eyes and go, I heard what you just said, and I care
Right.
deeply about you, and that is not affected.
Yeah.
Like, that feels different. So I think if you can get that, get that. But if you can't get that, there's so much out there that's a free resource available.
My thought was also like look for community as well.
Yes.
You can't afford or see, you don't have access to a therapist, a sense of community with people who are like-minded and encouraging and supportive.
Yep.
Those communities are out there online. You can find them. You can download
There's
Discord.
a Discord server. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can find these folks.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can get out there if you want me to send you a super long email to a short email. Like if you want me to over respond, that's my tendency. You can email imarriedyourtherapist@gmail.com, and I've got time. I'll reach out.
Yeah. But yeah, there are definitely resources available online, and I think it just kind of depends on the specific thing you're looking for. But community is huge. That's such a good point. I think a lot of what I'm doing in therapy is hoping to be able to get people connected to a community, to be building friendships and relationships, and that's a game changer, to have other people looking you in the eyes and saying, I see you for who you are, and I really love and care about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, you should be looking for community whether you're seeing a therapist or not. It's
Yeah.
such an important aspect of our lives.
Yeah. We all need it to some degree.
Yeah. Okay, well, we are about out of time. Do you have anything else on your mind?
I just want to invite listeners, if you have questions, please send them to imarriedyourtherapist@gmail.com. I love answering. Again, I know I keep saying this. I want to answer real life questions from people. I think these questions are so valuable because there's a real person on the other side of that. I don't think a lot of therapists are talking about the things that actually matter to folks. So, yeah, please, if you have a question, send it in. I love that. And if you're feeling alone, I think the point of this podcast, the point of the work that I do, the point of the stuff that we put out is all about, like, I think people relate to these questions because we all feel isolated.
And we do put out.
We do put out. So, yeah. Well, it's just that you're not alone. That's the message at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You're not alone, and we put out.
Those two things. Those are the takeaways.
Those two things. If you have a takeaway, Price farts in the bedroom. You're not alone. We put out. We have a cat named Alice. Now you've really gotten to know us, and yeah.
And my mom, listens to the podcast.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Hey, Mom.
Hi. We love you.
All right. Well, Ash, thank you so much for your time today.
Price, thank you for your time.
And we will see you next time on I Married Your Therapist. Okay, so what we're doing now is we're going to go to Chick-fil-A and get those pimento cheese, jalapeno honey sandwiches.
I'm sorry, queer community. I'm so sorry. I'm so weak. I'm one of the gay folks who does go to Chick-fil-A.
I'm telling you, if you have that sandwich, you might be you'll be willing to look past a lot of wrongdoing. You know,
it should not be allowed to be as good as it is.
It's
it really
so
should
good.
Not. I'm
it's
already
insane.
like, could I eat two? I feel like I could eat two.
I was gonna ask you to get two for me.
Oh,
so.
guys, try it, and then like donate your money to an organization that actually helps queer folks.